As Marie Antoinette once famously said during the French Revolution, let them eat steak. This is the ArsenalVision Post-Match Podcast. My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. I think that's the quote. On reflection, it may have been let them eat cake. But in light of Mikel Arteta visiting a steak restaurant, which I want to be clear is totally unacceptable, and we will dive into the tactical analysis of how the steak was placed into his mouth and why it was not the appropriate formation for that to be done. We will be deep diving into let him eat steak. I kid. We won't be deep diving into that at all. What we will be doing, we'll talk a bit of Arsenal stuff, some injury news, some transfer news. Lol, there is no transfer news. There it is, done. We're going to do our power rankings episode as sort of 3/4 of this episode. So if you haven't joined us on Patreon before, our power rankings episode is where we take sort of the other top 6 clubs, Newcastle, Chelsea, United, Liverpool, City, Spurs, and then one interloper, the interloper currently being Aston Villa, and we will rank them. Okay, not in terms of where they're on the table, because here's the funny thing about that. There's a table that ranks them. We'll rank them in terms of where we think they are currently, like in terms of how they're playing, in terms of their recent form, in terms of what we expect from them to come, where they sit right now at present. Gives us a chance to cover some of the games that have been played and look a little bit at the teams we're trying to chase down and the teams that are trying to chase us down, frankly. Not that I think that's the battle we're in, but, you know, the table is the table. So we're going to do a bit of that. We did a transfer overview pod over on Patreon where we covered some of the rumors of things we're linked with, talked about some of the profiles that we need. I thought it was really interesting with Phil Costa, who will be doing a lot more pods with us going forward. So I hope you enjoy Phil because Phil's going to be here. And we hope you will look forward to that. We also have a really exciting announcement of some other podcasts that are coming out that we'll be telling you about in the near future. So with all of that out of the way, I hope you're doing really well. And it is my great pleasure, as ever, to introduce to you a man that you already know and don't need to have introduced to you, and that is Clive. You can find him on Twitter at ClivePFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello.
How are you, sir?
I'm all right. Quiet weekend. Trying to disconnect a little bit away from Arsenal and watch a bit of non-league and watch Arsenal women yesterday. And I live where Luton ladies played Brighton ladies in the FA Cup yesterday. So a little bit of different football, shall we say.
Yeah, it's nice to do. It is a good time to reset your brain, I think, because you can get take lock this time of season. What I mean is you get so far down the rabbit hole of what's happening in the immediate moment that you kind of get locked into takes or locked into what the social media chatter is. And it's nice to get away from it a bit and reset. Think about what you really believe versus what your sort of last impression of things was. So I'm looking forward to having a bit of an Arsenal chat and also having a bit of a chat about what's going on at the clubs around us and sort of see where we fit in. I do want to mention, you know, I had a chance to listen to the Arscast before we got started, and there were some shots fired at you and I. You know, and I want to be clear for those who have not listened. These accusations were about us spreading love and appreciation. Now, granted, what we were spreading love and appreciation for was deeply mediocre footballers. Okay, guilty as charged. Because we are spreaders of love. What I want to volley back at the Arscast guys, at James and Andrew, is the spreading of hatred and contempt. I would like to know what the Magpie community thinks of James's opinions. What do magpies think? Songs lampooning them, wishing ill upon them, and to you, Andrew. What has Phil Collins ever really done other than perform a legendary drum fill that has been co-opted by every cheesy marketing campaign in history? So I think we can reflect on what we all spread into the world at this time. And actually now on a non-humorous note, I want to wish everybody listening, you, Clive, and to everybody, happy Martin Luther King Day. Obviously a wonderfully important, relevant figure in our society in modern history and someone who contributed a great deal. And we get this day off here in the United States from work to stop and reflect on Martin Luther King's message and where we are in the journey of sort of trying to deliver on the dream that he expressed all those years ago. So obviously, a very happy Martin Luther King Day to you.
Yeah, it's a bit of a US-centric weekend for me, actually, with the NFL playoffs ongoing. And we were talking, weren't we, offline about the Cowboys last night.
Did you see my tweet?
No, I haven't seen
about
it yet.
The Cowspurs?
Oh, yeah. I think... watching the Cowboys meltdown was interesting. I did get a bit of the Rams who lost by 1 point yesterday to Lions. So there's more to come tonight. So my house is very much an American football house at the moment. My son's very much into it. So a bit of a US weekend and more to come over the next few weekends.
Yeah, it's funny. Once upon a time, I was a Bears fan because I was born in Chicago, didn't live there long, but sort of adopted their sports teams. And there was a time when I was very, very young where that was a nice thing because Michael Jordan and the Super Bowl Shuffle, and there were good things that came from that. But the Bears have been so bad for so long, and I've shifted so much to loving Arsenal that now I can watch the NFL as a sort of disinterested third party. Having said that, living in Minnesota and having been a Bears fan, the Green Bay Packers are not a particularly beloved team here. And yet I don't like the Cowboys because of the whole cringy America's team thing.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
yeah.
was able to just watch it like, the way we will sometimes watch like United play Chelsea or Spurs play, United or something, where you're just rooting for red cards and fouls and general shithousery. And so, yeah, I was able to enjoy that in a sort of neutral way. Really, really interesting. And now Jerry Jones thrust in the limelight where he always thrives. So I look forward to that.
Yeah, the light is on him for sure.
Speaking about limelight, some focus on Mikel Arteta eating at a steak restaurant. Like here's my very quick take, and you can have a take on this, but I don't think we need it. But I'll just ask you, like, I wouldn't go to that restaurant because I just don't think it would be worth the money it would cost. I don't think the Salt Bay dude is cool. It's not for me. Having said that, like, I try not to judge other people's decision on where to eat their meals and what stuff they think is cool. And like, I just don't, I can't get worked up about it. But what I do think is somewhat relevant is the attempt by sort of tabloid media to pounce on it, the attempt by some people to pounce on it. And I think it just suggests that beneath the surface, there is a desire to sort of take Mikel down a peg, given the chance. But I thought this was really interesting because Tom Gibbs wrote an article, I'm not kidding, for the Daily Telegraph, basically saying, the difference between Klopp and Pep, or the difference between Pep and Mikel, is that you couldn't imagine Pep being seen at this restaurant, being filmed with this guy. And Arsenal Twitter, because Arsenal Twitter does what it does, not always for the best, but usually doesn't miss when you come for Arsenal, within seconds had photos of Pep with his whole team eating at the restaurant, Pep with his arm around Salt Bay, taking a picture with him. Salt Bay, can't even believe that's a thing that I'm saying. But so, like, it is pretty funny. And I guess the only reason there's an angle here, Clive, is the angle that it sometimes feels like there is very much a desire to take Mikel down a peg in some quarters. And I don't want to be Arsenal centric. Maybe that happens to all managers, but it does feel like it's happening to Mikel a little bit more this season.
Yeah, the light's been on him for a while, maybe since Richard Keys highlighted his behaviour on the sidelines. And I think for all sort of non-Arsenal people, they jumped on that and how he behaves and how he acts. And every time he shows one smidgen of a behavioural issue, it's magnified. And we saw the last-minute goal at Luton and how he ended up with a yellow card and then wasn't able to be on the sideline against Aston Villa. And I think that's a major factor in our season. So it's not funny, to be honest, Elliot, because it does have an impact to how we play, whether we can coach from the sideline. So I don't think it's funny. It comes back to the words. I've been thinking a lot actually because you have a bit of time to sort of disconnect, but you can just take a step back and have a little think. It just come back to a couple of things really. Mikel's likability. I mean, as Arsenal people, when we're winning, I sense, yeah, it's all good. But then sometimes when you have 2-3 defeats in a row, then what tends to happen is maybe some underlying feelings tend to come out from people who have been quiet while they've been winning. Where do you go when we lose? Is really a question for all of us as individuals. Where do we go when we lose? Where's your first point of fire? I think it's an individual way of people support their teams, and I tend to take a step back and look outward and look at other teams and then look at ourselves to just get some perspective because we're so invested. And I think that investment becomes into almost like a tunnel where you think no one else exists. But actually, for me, it's a time to step away, then come back again and have a look and try to remain calm and have some sort of holistic view. But hey, look, I'm a man in the autumn of my life, and so that makes sense to me. When you're a younger person just going through this for the first time with huge expectations, I'm not going to tell you how to support your club, but we're all different, aren't we? We're all different, and so we all can be different, shall we say?
I think there's a message in there too about Mikel and how we connect to Mikel too, in that he's a young man. in his career
Mm.
and a young man by the sort of standards of coaching ages. And I do think that once you've been through it enough, once you've sort of gone down the road enough, I think there is a mellowing maybe that happens, or an ability to understand how to manipulate the media, how to manipulate the press. But I think you see in younger managers quite often this fire and this intensity. People think of the avuncular Arsene Wenger, the philosopher Arsene Wenger. But when you think about the Arsene Wenger that came to Arsenal when he started, there was a much greater degree of sort of intensity, and anger is too strong a word, but he had bite to him. Not that he ever really
He was
lost that. I
establishing
mean,
himself, wasn't he? He
yeah,
was establishing
exactly, like
himself.
Mikel is
Yeah,
now.
yeah, exactly that.
Yeah, and so I just think, look, I'm not gonna lie. I think Mikel has a likability issue at some level, but I don't think sport is about likability fundamentally. What I think likability can help you is when you go through that downturn, do people want to stick with you? When you look at the managers that are able to survive a downturn, and whether it is Klopp or an Arsene Wenger or your Pep, although he hasn't really gone through any downturns, it's because they've won things. It's because they've established themselves.
Yeah.
Mikel is still, I mean, and he has won the FA Cup, let's be clear, but he's still trying to do that. I think, and you saw this in the All or Nothing documentary. Edu, in one scene at the cafeteria, right, in the mess hall, whatever you want to call it, right, where they're all eating,
Yeah.
commissary. He sort of says, I think, to Josh Kroenke, or was it? I think it was Edu saying it to Josh, seeing Mikel sort of talking to the players, and he said, if he can add that relationship quality, that ability to connect with them personally, he'll go to the very top.
Yeah.
And so even in that documentary, I think there's a suggestion that sort of relating to people and being able to connect personally was the piece he had to add. I don't think anybody doubts his reading of the game, his understanding of the game. So I don't know that any of this matters per se, but I do think the more likable you are, the less pressure gets heaped on you when times are a little tougher. Now, having said that, I do think there's hypocrisy, though, because the media fell all over themselves to love Jose Mourinho, who I think from a behavior standpoint was about as bad as it gets. Now, again, he had the winning reputation, and so maybe that's it. But so for me, Clive, the only real the only issue here is, can a lack of likability lead to a potential challenge with the pressure that gets put on you at the earliest signs of trouble?
Yeah, I think it has an effect, Elliot. And you mentioned Klopp, right? And Klopp is held up there, and quite rightly. He's been at the
Mhm.
club for 8-9 years now. Champions League
2015,
and
right?
League, yeah, and he's won some trophies. It's a bit unfortunate he won the big one after 30 years when no one was there. Much like Mikel won the trophy when no one was there watching.
Mm.
Um, Klopp didn't qualify for Champions League last year. Can you imagine if Mikel doesn't qualify for Champions League this year? What's going to happen? It'll be a challenge for us, right, to stay aligned. But when you have that track record, you can recover it. Then you look around the league, look at other managers like, say, Gary O'Neill and Eddie Howe, quite likable, good old English guys. Don't worry about it, lads. We got your back, And Mikel's different. And again, I was on my walk and I was thinking the other day, actually, and I was thinking about this word connection and likability. And I remember going to the Brighton game last year when we got beat and everything sort of blew up a little bit. And basically, it was quite a sad day, to be honest, that home game. Then we had the Wolves game thereafter, wasn't it? The Wolves game, and we won 5-0, new kits. Everything was nice and bright again. People have recovered emotionally and really recognised that the season was a really good one. And then Mikel came to speak to the crowd afterwards. Remember, Elliot, when he had to go on the
Oh, yeah.
microphone? And he
Hmm.
couldn't speak for 4 minutes or so because everyone was shouting his name. And
Hmm.
I thought back to that, and I thought back to some of the things we're seeing online in the last week or so. I had to remind myself of the connection that we have when things are going better. And it's very quick we erase the good and dive into the bad and stay there. When your manager can't even speak for the cheering he's getting, that was only a little while ago. Remember that things are not all too bad, and we were very close to being top on New Year's Day, and we were top at Christmas. So things have changed very, very quickly. Then I thought back to, okay, how did we get to that point of positivity? Then I thought, well, what drove that? Obviously, it was the alignment in the club and the whole project from top to bottom. But also there was a connection through to the fan base, right? Based on the youngest team in the league, doing what they did. We know we fell down. We sort of know the reasons why. Lost a couple of key defenders at the wrong time, and we lost some defensive stability, and we had some hobbled midfielders, and we ended up where we ended up. We could deal with it because it's Man City. They won everything in the world, right? So we could deal with it. Then I think back to this season. So what's changed? What's changed? Well, we've changed as fans. Our expectations have now changed. And maybe a couple of the transfer moves that have been made have tested that connectivity to us and tested that clarity, that alignment. And if people don't understand, they question. Right. So I think that's a key point to how potentially many of us are feeling. And so that connectivity and alignment and understanding the steps in the project is very, very important. I think that's where the Amazon documentary was really good. It educated people on where we were going and how we were going there. Maybe highlight a few personal characters. And now we have this situation where we really expect this just to continue. And it's a challenge when it's not been linear. And this is the time really for me. Anyway, the way I deal with it is say, okay, remind yourself what we're trying to do and how we're trying to do it. Look at the steps, try to understand why we've done certain decisions. I don't agree with every single one, but do I understand why? And then keep my perspective when I'm trying to support my team, even though part of my New Year's was so saddened by the results. I'm afraid Arsenal shouldn't be the only thing that makes me happy, So I keep some perspective in that and then go forward from there.
Yeah, Arsenal is the only thing that makes me happy. I am pretty clear about that with my daughters and my wife, just so that they understand where I stand on that sort of thing. Which is why they've left me. They're all gone right now.
I'm alone with the dog.
It does suck though, right? Like they're gone this weekend. It's just me and the puppy and the cat and the house and the internet and never mind. I'm not going to go there. But and there's no Arsenal this weekend. Like, yeah. You know me. I've been on Y Scout basically since they're that's it. Just Y Scout and no other websites. Now for our sponsor. No. So anywho, well, let's talk a little bit about actual Arsenal news. There isn't much in the way of transfers. We might touch on that in a second, but I want to talk about returning players. It does appear that Thomas Partey is on the brink of returning. Fabio Vieira looks pretty fit and potentially on the brink of returning. And Timber is running on grass, which is a good place to run, which is encouraging and might mean that while I think he's still quite a bit away, could be back this season. Let's focus on Thomas Partey, though, the biggest one of the three for a moment. Let's just do this quickly. How important is the return, do you think, assuming he comes back and doesn't, get injured immediately straight away the second he's back? And how do you think he'd be used? I mean, there's a part of me that really wonders now that when we had Partey and Rice together, we were seeing him as a fullback. So I think that's a pretty interesting question now. I don't think we have a very clear picture of how Mikel would want to use Partey and Rice together. What do you think his return means for us, both in terms of importance, but in terms of how the manager might shuffle the deck?
Yeah, this is part of the lack of clarity thing, right? So we added Declan Rice in, and people are thinking, is he going to be the Partey replacement or is he going to be the Xhaka replacement? I'm not sure today we're any clearer. The only thing is that he's carried us in his rucksack for the most of the season in midfield until he ran out of energy at Fulham a little bit, and that was it really. So and so I think with Timber coming in, you think back to the first game of the season and how we set up, and think back to the Charity Shield how we set up. So they're two milestone games, right? So Charity Shield, it was Partey and Rice together. When you come to the big stuff, you don't mess about. Forest at home, well, we just use Partey as right back, get him to roll into midfield and set up that way. And because it's not Forest at home, right? So I don't think we need to have one solution. The key is with Partey available, and we have multiple solutions, and that's what we should be trying to do. I mean, game models now are not just about you set up and see how it goes for 5 minutes. They're set up in time periods, right? You change based on what the opposition does and you adapt. And part of the challenge in modern coaching is adapting very, very quickly when the opposition makes a change, and you would make a change to counter that, or make a change to make them counter their change they've just made and revert back and put you in a position of strength. That is why people sit in the stands looking at the game. That is why people have analyst clips coming to them at halftime and all the data is presented to them immediately. The game has changed massively from the game I grew up with. This information is just instant now. We know exactly what's happened, where the pressure is, what the game plan is. And all we have to do is make sure we build a squad that can adapt to what other teams throw at us and maintain our strengths over longer periods of time to make sure we control games and control where we want to play. And we've definitely improved on that angle. Where we haven't improved is the one thing that Arsenal fans agree on, and we do all agree on this, is the fact of kicking that ball into that thing called the net. That is the last thing that we are not doing. And based on that, you go where you want to go. You know, but if we start kicking that ball into that net, we'll all be aligned again very, very quickly.
I do want to mention, as we've been recording, the news has come out that Everton and Forest have been charged with a breach of FFP rules. It is unclear what the punishment will be. There's some suggestion that Everton may be able to navigate this such that there's no additional points deduction, although an additional points deduction is possible, which leads me to think that Sean Dyche is the living embodiment of that famous tweet. I went to my landlord this weekend and asked him to raise my rent. That's how much I believe in my grind hustle. I think Dyche just wants to show that he can avoid a relegation with whatever the league throws at him. But yeah, so we don't fully know what's happening there. My recommendation to you, listener, is to only ever listen to this podcast. But in this one instance, you can go listen to Righty's House. Of course, you should listen to Righty's House. They had Swiss Ramble on, who is really the authority on covering these financial things. He never does podcasts, ever. I know I've asked, but when Ian Wright calls, there is only one answer, and the answer is yes. They did a pretty good summation of this without getting into the weeds, just sort of summarizing what's gone on there and what the breaches are, and also sort of explaining how the City thing differs. Because obviously every time this stuff comes out, there's going to be a what about City, and it is quite a different situation, and they explain that a bit. So if you want to get more of that, you can certainly get that over there. Clive, I think the Thomas Partey return, the most interesting knock-on effect of the Thomas Partey return, I think, relates to Kai Havertz. Because I think that Kai Havertz has had periods of playing well and periods of playing not as well. But I don't think we can sit here right now and say Kai Havertz has nailed down left 8 to the point that everybody acknowledges that role is his. He's got it. He's made it his through his performances, and nothing's going to change. I think that a Partey, Rice, and Odegaard midfield is now squarely in the frame as something that could be done quite a bit. And I wonder if that potentially also, though, frees up Kai Havertz to be deployed a little more as a center forward off the bench or as a center forward first choice when we want to move Jesus out wide, or if Jesus is unavailable. Is that a knock-on effect you think is valid, or am I just searching?
Yeah, it's called depth. It's called depth in your squad of good players, you know. And in City's midfield, they play one person in Rodri. He plays most of the time, and when he doesn't play, they lose. But he has Nunes, he has Kovacic, he has Bernardo, he has Foden, he has all these rotating.
Whoa! Are you just not going to mention Calvin Phillips, the linchpin of their team?
I was just about to get to him,
No.
actually,
Okay.
and so yeah, and we don't care when we see them rotate. We just go, oh well, City are just giving him a rest, you know. And I think we have to get to that point. I think we were heading to that point where we could manage minutes more effectively. And let's not pretend that Jesus and Partey are sort of robust injury-wise. let's not pretend, because they're not, right? And so the ability to manage the minutes of those players is something we were moving towards until we lost those players. Jesus was already one knee op in and another knee injury this season alone. So 2 knee ops in his time at Arsenal. And Partey's, I think he's had a procedure on his thigh, potentially not before time, shall we say, to make sure he comes back in some sort of health. And that's on the back of his most, 33 games last year, I think he played for us, but no one cares about that because he missed the big ones where we really needed him. And this year he has not been there. And thank goodness we spent 100 million on a player that can hold our midfield together. So Yeah, you know me, you know my thoughts, right? We beat Man City at home. We made 3 key substitutions in that game. Tomiyasu, Havertz, and Partey that were all involved in the winning goal, the winning goal. We were able to power up from the bench.
Yeah.
And I want the ability to add quality and power from the bench so we can win these critical games and not be drawing and losing them by the odd goal.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend Partey at right back is my favorite thing we've ever tried, but I'm also not going to pretend like some people will that it never worked. He's looked good in that role at times. I mean, he hasn't done it a ton, but he's looked okay there. The reason I reference that is we are desperately short in defense, and having Partey as an option at right back, which means White becomes an option at center back, which means Tomiyasu, if he's back and available, is an option at left back and not having to cover right back. Like suddenly you can make things work a bit if you have to. Assuming no defender comes in, and then if Timber comes back, I think it's deeply unfair to expect him to be fit and available this season, only because if he does come back, we know that after these major injuries, that subsequent sort of compensation injuries are common, but it gives us a lot more flexibility. But then the other interesting thing then from a left 8, right 8, midfieldy kind of thing is Vieira looking pretty good, back, fit, training. I don't think Fabio Vieira has ever convinced anybody. And if he has convinced you, I'd be surprised how, because he's just not, he's never had a real run in the team where he's been able to show his stuff. But this was not a £5 million punt. This is a player that was extremely highly thought of when he was acquired. He was acquired at a real fee and, thought of as having real talent and has flashed it at times. And for a team that can't score a goal, he's certainly one of those guys that can, laser one in from outside the box. He can add goals. I think, though, he's a phenomenal ball striker. I'm not going to sit here and say he's an every game starter who will transform us, but I think it's a pretty big addition because if you look at the 8s, Odegaard and Kai, whatever you think of either of them, the players sort of behind them in the moment have been more 6 than 8. It's Jorginho, it's Rice, those are the guys that we're bringing in. Vieira is the one that truly can play a defense splitting pass, score a goal from out, from the edge of the box. So is that maybe a sneaky important return that we undervalue just because he's never had a chance to really establish himself?
I think it's an important return from many angles, really. Depending on how he comes back, how he trains, and how he looks physically, he's got a chance to really mature himself from a power perspective. And I think he needs to add a little bit more, particularly around protecting the ball. I have seen probably his best half of football against Fulham. It was this season when he came on. I looked as good as anything I'd seen this season. He was just fantastic. And if you think back, if you people are wondering about value, etc., but think back to that period when Odegaard was carrying that hip injury and he wasn't playing well. And, I'm not sure if I'm getting my dates mixed up, but Vieira was not himself in the best physical shape. If you have a situation where Vieira's fit and well and playing well or not suspended for getting a red card, then we don't play Odegaard for an injury. Then we don't have 5 pods talking about Odegaard's creativity numbers dropping, and taking shots on the wrong foot, etc. These things do have a knock-on effect to our ability to protect players, make sure they're fit and available. They may be on a team sheet, they may not be themselves. When Odegaard missed his international break, he came back and his numbers and our team dynamic has changed since he's come back. Okay, we've lost results recently, but if you look at where we were start of the season, we didn't look like ourselves at certain periods. We looked like ourselves against Liverpool, even though we lost the game. Right? Look, same at West Ham, same at Villa. We lost those 3 games, but so these players are important to make sure we can protect the people that we want to see and make sure we're not playing people hobbled, right? And we know we've done that. And so, yeah, I'm hopeful for Vieira. I've seen the very best of him. I've also seen times when the crowd have been frustrated with him in the ground. He is a talent, but I always look at the wages, and he's on a developmental wage. Forget the fee, look at the wages. And I think that's when you can start to expect a bit more. So if you want to have a go at Kai Havertz, he gets paid to deliver at the Odegaard level. So that's the truth. Vieira and Smith-Rowe on similar numbers. Developmental players we're trying to bring into the squad. So Vieira, Smith-Rowe, Nelson, do you think all 3 are going to start the season next year? I don't. I'm just reading at Aston Villa, still interested in Smith Rowe. I don't want to see it, but I also recognise that we're sitting here looking at other teams selling on their youth players. And we can see that has a major impact. What we mentioned with Forest and Everton earlier on, Elliot, it has a major impact. I look around the league when people are selling their academy players, and I include Spurs in that, who sold the biggest one of all in Harry Kane. And they're able to reinvest that money and be decisive. And they're the only team that can be decisive in transfer windows so far, whether you agree with their choices or not. They can move, they've got financial flexibility because they sold Harry Kane, which is pure 80-odd million profit to that club. And that empowers them, So yeah, we just need to get into that position, get to a point in our strategy where we, as a club, are fighting maybe our values around opportunities for academy kids and recognise we want to grow the squad to the expectations by which most of the fans have. We may need to make some painful decisions.
Say this, if we sell an academy player too, we have a hell of a lot of money to spend because of the way the rules are factored. The immediate profit versus the amortized spend, I think gives you a lot of room to bring in a lot of player. And so there are some tough decisions to be made. One of the things we debated over on Patreon, so I won't repeat it here, but was would you sell Eddie Nketiah now in this window, regardless of whether a replacement is brought in? I think these are the kind of questions the club has to ask itself in terms of where's the cash available and how do we maximize it so that we have room to continue to build the way we need to build. So let's do a quick hit here just on the transfer side of it. I'll confess I don't see a deal being done this January. I think it's going to be too hard. We're very, very, very good. And no matter how frustrated you are with us, even if you're frustrated this season hasn't been what you hoped it would be yet, even the most negative view of us, you have to acknowledge we're very good. And the kind of player we'd get that would impact our season in a meaningful way has to be quite good. Buying a player who's not quite good, no, we don't need another Pablo Mari or Cedric, so I don't see the value of that. The idea of, well, you just need a body to get in. Well, a body just getting in means you lose games if you play them, right? I mean, we saw that last season. Saliba was out. We had a body that we brought in that didn't work. So I think you need something pretty good to come in to move the needle. I don't think just getting someone that, it makes you better. Getting bad players doesn't make you better. Like, it's not how football works. So Clive, do you see a deal that might get done or that you wish we would do? Is there a transfer move out there that still feels percolating enough to you that you think it could happen? Could we get shocked by something that happens in the last week of the transfer window? It's all very, very quiet right now.
Yeah, I think it's going to be opportunity based. I'm not sure just because Everton have been sort of clipped around their ears again financially, whether they sold a player in January, what that would do for them, And
so, just to be clear, that would have no relation to the trouble they're presently in.
Yeah, exactly. So they may not be looking vulnerable on that basis, but obviously looking forward, I'm sure there are assets that they need to be making sure they move on. Whether it's this window or the next one, if there's an offer for them in this window, because dominoes are falling at other clubs, they may take it rather than wait and see how form goes, etc. And for example, if the worst was to happen to Everton and they were to go down, then they may not be in such a strong position to negotiate. So there's many, many things on the table here. From my angle, I'm just pretending nothing's going to happen, and I'm looking at internally what we can do at the minimal cost. I think there's an opportunity, if I look at Arsenal footballistically wise, and I look at returning players, I think there's an opportunity to maybe mature how our fullbacks play. We spoke about this before, Elliot, and maybe have a bit more of an attacking emphasis on maybe one side of the pitch, rather than think about a back five, front five type solution. We saw some things, interesting things in the Liverpool game, which I think maybe the start of something new, with a bit more of a sort of traditional back four and a traditional double pivot and four people really staying high and pressing on and having one person join them later. I can see that maturing a little bit more, if you call it a 4-2-3-1 or 4-2-2. I don't really mind. It's up to you. but really they were distinct roles, and I quite liked the partnerships that were developed on that pitch. And so, yeah, I think it was a very very interesting tactical dynamic in that Liverpool game. And I'm so interested to see how we develop that in the Palace game at the weekend. I can't wait for it. Literally can't wait for it to see what we've learned and see how we're going to push forward the next phase of the season. So I could see a potential left back coming. I don't know why. Fullback can play on both sides, a bit more attacking. That's the only one I think we can get the most maximum tactical value out of. The rest, the names, we all know them, and they're all wrapped up in how much money you have and how many players that you can move on. And so that's a matter of multiple dominoes falling. So, but yeah, a left back at a good price, that potential player with a different dynamic to what we already have. I can see that potential in January.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's not that I don't see holes in the squad that we need to plug to just make sure the season doesn't derail. But I think what we learned last season is if those plugs, so to speak, aren't quality, it doesn't actually fix anything. It doesn't save your season. When Saliba went out, you look at the players we tried to use in his absence, and the results are clear. We became one of the leakiest defenses in the league, and our season collapsed. We had a player. The player couldn't maintain the level.
I think it's really important, Elliot, that for me anyway, that we stay on plan and we don't do anything stupid because we lost 2 league games and an FA Cup game. Stay on plan. Tactically, what can we do to maximise this group? And people may laugh, we don't need a left back, need a centre forward. But if we have a fullback that pushes on and our forwards are now playing 10 yards further in, we get forwards, we get Saka, we get Martinelli, we get more connectivity, because I think the number one thing we have to fix in our front line for me is connectivity, is the ability to connect. And when we have certain players not playing, particularly Jesus, we lose connectivity in the front end of our pitch and we don't look like an Arsenal team. And the only person that gets close to that, people are not going to like this, but Kai Havertz helps us connect in the front line. I think connectivity is the number one thing. If I was ever near that team or working with them, I'd be talking about how we can get connections, good connections, timely arrival in the box, making sure we do things in one. When you see it, do it. First time shots, don't have 5 touches. Connectivity, timing, conviction. That's what I'd be talking about. And how can I position these guys to be in these positions more often? And you may laugh, but maybe a fullback option will allow us to do that. We don't need it per se, but maybe we just tweak the fullbacks that we have, their position, rather than invert, but they play on the outside and we cradle the team. You know my views on this. I think it's the maximum way to get the best benefit. Even watching Reece Nelson's run against Liverpool in the first chance in the first minute, I love that run. Out to in, almost playing like a second striker, really pressing from the front. I love that. That's a tweak, that's a change. That can be done easily. If Saka can do it, stay central more often, and we protect him on his right-hand side so he's not making tackles on the corner flag. We can do this stuff with the group that we have. It doesn't always have to be in the YouTube comps. We just got to work a bit better, a bit sharper.
It's funny, right? Because during the window, every move you could do, you should do. And every player we're linked with is going to make it, Xerxes and, well, this Mayoral guy like that surely can't be real. But every player you're linked with. But when we were linked with Vieira, I know I watched the comps and we scouted him and it's exciting. And Sambi, it's exciting. But a lot of these moves don't hit the level you hoped for one reason or another. They just don't. They never do. And so this stuff is hard, and just doing something, anything, isn't the way to go. To your point, don't screw something up. And I do think this is where Mikel needs to be really, really careful on what he believes he can get from a Partey the rest of the season, from a Timber late in the season, because if he believes Timber will be back at the end of March in a state to play and contribute, and he believes Thomas Partey is past his injury issues and will be fairly reliable, suddenly you've got quality options that can cover holes on multiple parts of the pitch. And you don't have to make a move that's a roll of the dice that wasn't on plan, to use your phrase, right, Clive? You don't have to break your plan. These are hard calculations to make. My opinion personally is I don't see a move right now that looks like it's going to happen. Now,
Yeah.
so much of transfers is opportunism. A club decides late in a window they're going to sell, or a club finds the guy they want to buy to replace so you can buy the guy that you want. We'll see how all that shakes out. And
This
one
is
thing that is interesting to keep track of, sorry, Clive, I was just going to say, now that people are really seeing the teeth to FFP, there may be some clubs out there, I don't know who they are,
exactly.
but there may be some clubs out there that are like, you know what? We kind of need to cash in now. Because we're getting a really good offer on something, and maybe we're in more trouble for the next accounting period than we had expected. So,
Yeah,
something to think about.
that comes under the phrase market opportunities, and
Yeah.
this is why I hope that Mikel and Edu in the club just hold course, very much so, and trust in their abilities to coach and develop people, and make sure we all stay aligned. And this is why we started this podcast talk about Mikel's likability. Was maybe I'm quite glad that he doesn't care. He doesn't want to be liked. He just wants to do the best for the club. If if it was me, I'd be getting Osimhen in, and we'd have a 10-point deduction, right? If it was me, and so because I want to be liked, I want to make sure that all the fans that we talk to who want to get new shiny signings, I want to give it to them. So it's very important we don't end up in that situation. It's very important we don't end up with a situation where we have Aubameyang, Lacazette, and Pepe all not playing well. £170 million worth of player on I don't know how much in wages, and we're not in the Champions League, and we ended up giving them all away. That's not where we want to be. That's not going to put us in a strong position. And people are comparing us to City and Chelsea this weekend. Well, if we keep getting that situation, we're never going to get to that level of success they've had over the last decade. And I know the charges are coming. I know it's coming. But there are some things they've done quite well from a financial point of view. And there's some things that we can learn, but the way they've done it and the way they've been funded obviously doesn't really work. But that is to be defined. But we need to worry about ourselves and how we operate. Let's not go down that route again, where we're having to give away other players because we can't sell them because of the contractual situation, etc., and where they are in their careers and how they used Arsenal as a stepping stone rather than a place where we want to be to win things. And the group we have to now, I trust their motivations. They may not always kick in the back of the net, but I trust their motivations why they're here. And I don't forget where we were and what we had to do to course correct.
Yeah. You ready to jump into some power rankings?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Let's go for the fun part of the pod, for those people who've hung with us this part. But I think if you're going to power up, do some power rankings, you need some energy. You need to feel healthy and ready to consume this great content. And the only way you're going to do that is if you take AG1. That's right. AG1 is 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, adaptogens, probiotics. It's all the daily nutrients that you need for energy, focus, strength, and clarity. I started taking it for gut health. That was the thing that I needed. I had some gut health issues that were bothering me, had it recommended, started taking it, loved it, found that it was helping me get off the amount of coffee I was drinking, which is great. Designed by athletes too. So from a recovery standpoint, if you're trying to get fit, if you're trying to lose weight, a big thing about being fit is your recovery. Actually, I think it's the thing that holds back professional athletes, maybe more than anything. What's that recovery cycle? How quickly can you recover and go again? AG1 is big in the recovery cycle. So it's just a phenomenal daily nutritional supplement that isn't a gummy sugar candy that has the word vitamin on the outside with 50 calories coming from sugar. It's got low sugar. It's keto friendly, vegan friendly, paleo friendly, all that stuff. You can take it in some water, drink it down. You're going to love it. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs. I take them when I head off to London and see my favorite team, the Arsenal, in case you've ever heard of them, with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/vision. That's drinkag1.com/vision. Check it out, Clive. Is that enough of that?
Indeed.
Now, okay. Power rankings. Here's how it works. We start with the worst. We go to the best. Arsenal are not in the rankings because, as we know, they are the best, and that is presumed. We give you our sense of where these clubs are now and where they're going, not where they are in the table. So it's time to be controversial right off the bat. At the very bottom, and here's who we're going to be ranking today: Newcastle, Chelsea, United, Spurs, Villa, City, and Liverpool, not necessarily in that order, and it won't be in that order. I am going to say that the bottom team is Manchester United. They're dead last. I have them as the worst. I realize in the table they are currently sitting 7th on 32 points, which, that's whatever you want to make of it. They have a -5 goal difference, which is extraordinary, a -3.8 expected goal difference. In terms of expected goals, they sit 2019, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11th in expected goals scored. In expected goals allowed, they're worse, 2019, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14. They're 13th in expected goals allowed. Just a dreadful, horrible, no good team. Their best player might be Jadon Sancho, who is
I don't think
firing in Germany already. Firing, has an assist already. Just a brilliant player, playing brilliant football, but not for Manchester United. Clive, I have them last. What's your take on Manchester United, who eked out a draw against the detestable and loathsome Tottenham Hotspur at the weekend, despite, I think, showing very, very, very little quality?
Yeah, they're a moments team, aren't they? And their team is lacking identity at the moment. And I looked at their team on the weekend, and I just looked at them all and thought, how are you set up to succeed, right? And so if you look at the fullbacks, Dalot and Wan-Bissaka, well, Wan-Bissaka's on his left foot. He can only do so much. People say he wasn't technical enough on his right foot. So that's a problem. I think Dallow's not a bad player, actually, and I think he can hold his head up this season. But you've got Johnny Evans and Rafa Varane. I mean, Varane's got knees of dust, and Johnny Evans, he should be coaching the team, not playing in it, right? So, so he went down with Leicester last year, and he's ended up at Manchester United, and he looked okay for the period he was on. You walk into a Spurs game, and Spurs, we know what they do. They overload central midfield. They bring their fullbacks in and go a 2-3. Create their box that way, and Doggy and Porro are very active at the base of their team, and they're very active players. And they overload the central area. So what do? You roll out an 18-year-old kid in Kobe Mainoo, who's fantastic, and then you give him Ericsson, he looks like he's aging by the hour, and so you can't. And then you have Bruno, who's pointing everywhere but never standing in the right place, and that's your midfield. I mean, you can't succeed with that, The wide players in Rashford and Garnacho, people can have their opinions. And Garnacho's, I think he's shown a level of responsibility for a young kid this season, for someone who's 19. He's not playing like a 19-year-old. And there are other people with more senior money and senior positions who are not holding themselves up with the same level of responsibility and leaving it to Garnacho and Højlund and players like this. I think it's such an interesting discussion, Manchester United, but we know they're about to go through significant change. And so I'm not one for laughing at these things, because the people around, they're not dumb. They can see what we see, and it's going to be a matter of how they make that change. For me, it's going to be organisationally, and heard it say before, Elliot, if you do get the right organisation around recruitment and a technical director, they can do anything from there, because they have the size of club, they have the revenue. They may have to do some of what we did with some of our players, which is pay them to go. So it could take some time, but once they do get straight, I'm afraid that's all we're going to see in our newspapers once they get straight, because, that's what's going to happen eventually. But at this moment in time, they're not in the best place.
I think they'll be bad forever, personally. So first of all, I want to express my relief to Andre Onana. I think he could have really gotten hurt by that Bentancur shot, and he got out of the way of it nicely. And I'm just so glad that he was able to do that. So kudos to him. I'm going to, by the way, Rasmus Højlund, I know people rate him. I know people like him. I want to be clear, from a data standpoint, this guy is terrible. Now, I use my eyes, and I see things in Højlund that I think could be good. He was unproven when they bought him. It's not like he had lit it up. He has 2 goals. He took his goal brilliantly, by the way. I think he took it well. Yeah. He is averaging 1.6 shots per 90. For a center forward, that at any club, let alone Manchester United, that is horrid, wretched, no good. The data's not good. He's got 2 goals. I don't know that he can be the center forward for a club the size of United. But setting that aside, Clive, I'm just going to say this about United, and we can probably leave it here. I'm going to default to something I never default to, but I really believe it. There aren't enough people trying. There just aren't enough players trying for Eric Ten Hag on that pitch. Marcus Rashford is so done with Ten Hag. He does not track back. He does not work for the team. He is not alone. A few players try really hard and run around, and the other players stand around and watch the ball get progressed by them. It's nuts.
Yeah.
They'll just watch a player carry the ball past them, have the best view of it in the world. Like there is something going on there where there's definitely a cluster of players that are not giving everything they can give. And I know that's not the kind of analysis we usually engage in, but that's what my eyes tell me. And when that happens, usually the manager's gone, you know?
Yeah, when you're in an organization that's about to go through significant change, what do? Do you say, well, I want to stay here, I want to be part of this? Or do you say, you know what, I've got a contract. I don't care what you do. I've got a contract and I've signed it. I'm going to look after my legs, mate. So, because if you don't like me, then someone else will, but they won't like me if I'm injured, right? So, it's just the nature of change. And it comes back to what I was saying earlier about being really aligned and connected end to end. When you have that collective goal and common identity, it's very easy to go in the same direction. That needs to be fostered. It's quite interesting watching Spurs. I know Spurs are next in your list, but watching Spurs,
they're not. I have a team below them.
Well, I'll save the Spurs bit for a bit later then. But it's quite the listener knows what I'm going to say. There was one team in that pitch that was playing for the manager, and one team that you could question that.
Yeah, the issues with Spurs were talent and tactics. The issue with United were also talent and tactics, but also effort, in my view. And when that last one is in question, something is broken. I think things are really broken at United. I've said on this podcast, I think they would finish bottom half. I still think that's absolutely in play. I think they're really, really bad. So we'll just have to see. The team that I have next, though, Clive, on the list is Newcastle.
Okay.
And I think Newcastle could have been last, except that I see in Newcastle more than I see in United in terms of upside, but they are really bad right now. And this is going to be kind of stunning to people who haven't looked at the table. Newcastle are 10th behind Chelsea, which is pretty remarkable. From an underlying standpoint, it's better than United, especially in terms of XG and goals scored and things like that. They are a +9 goal difference compared to United's -5. But when you put together a run like Newcastle have just put together, you cannot avoid being very low on these power rankings. I'm going to read out to you their Premier League results. Lost to City, lost to Liverpool in one of the biggest hammerings on XG ever, lost to Forest, lost to Luton, beat Fulham. Who does that? Lost to Spurs, lost to Everton, beat United, lol, beat Chelsea, lol, lost to Bournemouth. That's going all the way back to when they played us. If you throw in, they lost to Dortmund right after they played us. But if you just look at that, let's see, 1 loss, 3 wins. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 losses and 3 wins. That's really, really bad, Clive. And they are out of legs, out of players. The manager has tried to play the same players into the ground in every competition. And I think you're seeing it taking its toll now. Injuries, absences. They might have to sell players in this window, from what I understand, due to FFP issues. I think the wheels have come off a bit, and I'll be curious to see what their owners want to do to get this back on track, because I think they are very much on the outside looking in at any hope of a Champions League place for next season.
And they probably qualified for Champions League too soon. That's the truth of it. They didn't foresee the effort required. They didn't understand the training methods required to sustain their style of play over a longer period of time. And we've fallen to foul of that maybe last season. The pace at which they play, particularly at home, has caught them out. They've had injuries, and they've had the Champions League games, which have been high pressure, high intensity, high emotion, great for the fans, but very taxing to the squad. And you look at the fact that away from home, they are second bottom in the away league table. So at home they have their crowd and they have they have the environment which allows them to play as they like, and we saw that for ourselves really, and throw their elbows around, etc. When they go away into a different environment, they're not able to do that and impose themselves. I think Newcastle is a very interesting project. I think for so many reasons. Hey, look, you can sit back and say they've got all this money. Well, you know what? They can't spend it. They can't spend it because of profit and sustainability and FFP rules. They can't do what City and Chelsea have done to the league. They're not allowed to, right? Even the fact that they're way richer than both, they're not allowed to. And the situation means they're hamstrung. You could say that's right or is that wrong? Well, we've sat there and watched Chelsea for 20 years be the most successful club in our country based on a funding model that none of us, looking back now, should be proud of, right? So, and we accepted it. You know, I don't want to go into City stories too much because I think it's to be told, but we accepted it. And Newcastle are not able to do that because the rules have been tightened up. Then you look at what's happening at Manchester United with Ineos, and they quite like the Newcastle director of football, Dan Ashworth. They quite like him, right? They quite like Paul Mitchell, the ex-Tottenham head of recruitment. They're two elite people in their field. If Manchester United are to take Dan Ashworth out of Newcastle, that would be a significant cog out of their machine. And I wonder what direction they would go to then. And I do think that's a club worth watching, because I think the direction could change depending on if they get their people headhunted, etc. It won't be immediate, but it's something to watch for over the summer, over the next few weeks. And so, yeah, it's such an interesting, despite having all of that money, all of that ability to change their infrastructure and really change the whole area, they're not able to transfer that on the pitch because of the financial restraints around them. And yeah, I'm not really a fan of them as a club and the identity that they've managed to forge with the British media. It feels very, very British-centric to me. And they seem to have acquired many, many fans in the media all of a sudden because they're a new story. They're new. Last year we were new. We're not new anymore. Let's kick our legs away. But they were new. So I think it's going to be one to watch it. Over the summer, let's see what direction Newcastle are able to go down when a new financial fair play window opens up. And also, can they improve their commercial revenues? Because if they can, then they're able to flex their muscles a bit more.
They 100% can and will through all the same dodgy tactics that like a City have employed. That will happen. But because it is a 3-year period that's examined for any FFP considerations, prior to the new ownership, they had dreadful revenue. So they're hamstrung by that at least for another year or so. And they're going to have to just deal with that. Not to mention if they want to be, they won't be probably in the Champions League next season. If they're not in European competition at all, that almost helps them because the UEFA FFP rules are stricter and tighter than the Premier League ones. So they could fart around a little bit more, if they're out of Europe trying to get better and then, use all the wacky financial nonsense to correct it when they get back into Europe. So it'd be interesting to see, but I think they're in deep trouble. They look like they're a bit out of legs. There's rumors of them having to sell now to just get compliant. And if they've run out of legs and they don't get players back, it could get tricky. I still think they finish above United though, because as I've said, United are a dumpster fire. So that's 8, that's 7. Now we go to 6. 6 for me, pretty straightforward here that it's Chelsea. Chelsea are a weirder one, Clive, because Chelsea have all the players. So it's hard to know which ones are good or not because you can't keep track of them all. Chelsea have very good underlying metrics, which makes them weird as well. Now, they only have a +4 in goal difference. They've scored 35, which not great, but we've only scored 37. They've conceded 31, very much not great. But they're massively underperforming their XG and slightly underperforming their XG allowed. Very similar story to us. On expected goal difference, they would be 4th. So as I've mentioned, pretty good underlyings, but they do currently sit 9th on 31 points. They've won their last 3 in the league. They've won 4 of their last 5. Nkunku's now there. Is there a danger that Chelsea finish the season strong? I would prefer that not happen. Can you talk me out of that? Because I would prefer not to see that happen.
I don't sense it per se, but I think they're on the back of 3 or 4 wins, and And so there's something happening there. But to be honest, Elliot, they got so much sort of good talent. They're going to have good days. But I watched their games, and I watched the game at the weekend versus Fulham, and they were hanging on. They were hanging on. Okay, Fulham. I'm not going to say that we've had great success against them, but they were truly hanging on at home in the West London derby, and Fulham had them in periods in that pitch. And I can't, if I close my eyes, I can't tell you their style. I just look at their players they have on the pitch and just think, okay, they got these two in midfield, Caicedo and Enzo, like £220 million worth of player, and they're just allowed to jog around the middle of the pitch, and no one seems to care, And Conor Gallagher just dashing and pressing in behind a striker of your choice, and Kunku seems to be injured again. Now, we got fair's fair, right? We lost Timber on the first day of the season. They lost Kunku at a similar time, and they haven't seen him, so that's their potential centre forward gone, and they're left with Nicholas Jackson, who not really a great finisher, right? So Sterling's carrying from a wide forward perspective, and obviously Cole Palmer is the next coming of of Jack Grealish in the English media mind. He's the next one that's coming through, and so yeah, they got. I do like that Noddy Makeleke. I think he's interesting, but again, he's thrust into the limelight at Chelsea. A lot of these young players have accepted the big contracts, and they've accepted the environment by which they're in, which means they'll play one, sit one, play one, sit one, and it's going to be a challenge for them. And I just don't understand that model. I generally don't understand what they're trying to do from a first team perspective. They are still quite young, similar age to us. I think us, Burnley, and Chelsea are the three younger squads in the Premier League. But we have massive expectations on ours, and Chelsea are sitting there with they need to be in Europe. They surely need to be in Europe for their revenue situation. Some form of European football needs to have come to that club. So they are going through a very, very interesting period. It's so interesting that we're talking about money a lot on this podcast. I think maybe that's relevant with the news coming out today, but I think it's more relevant in Premier League thought processes than there ever has been, because the Premier League is sitting there not wanting to be independently regulated, so they have to be seen to be getting their house in order. And I think it's going to really dictate a lot more of our thinking. And I know myself, I need to understand this. I can't have unrealistic YouTube expectations on my football club when they're operating under a different environment. I need to understand it. It's very important that we do as fans, because our financial landscape is changing for us all. And let's not think that we're not included, because we no doubt are.
Yeah. I don't have much to say about Chelsea aside from the fact that it feels like they have a collection of talent that could be assembled into something that succeeds. Little speculative, and Kunku hasn't been able to stay fit, obviously. So that's an issue. Nico Jackson can't finish his dinner. He's currently off, I believe, with Senegal, right? In the AFCON, so they don't have him. But there's a lot of young talent there, and there's a lot of talent that was highly regarded by a lot of people. So I maybe I'm anchoring to my priors, but it feels like they could be good. I have this weird feeling that maybe Pochettino's not very good. Like, do we know for a fact that Pochettino's great? I mean, he brought Spurs their greatest ever era in which they won nothing. Let's just make sure we emphasize that. But he had Heung-min Son and Harry Kane, two of the best forwards in the history of the league, in their prime. And his play was get stuck in the tackles and boot it long to the guys who are good. I don't know. I'm not totally sure if he's great. He built a reputation at a club where he had a unique advantage up front and leveraged that into winning nothing. Again, so important we emphasize that. So for me with Chelsea, I see a team that with their underlying metrics and their talent and no Europe should be able to chase some teams down in the back half of the season. I think there's some bad teams above them, so we'll see what happens. I don't think they'll quite have enough to get to Champions League, but they play Liverpool away in their next fixture, and we will be, as loathsome as it is to say it, rooting for Chelsea in that fixture. So just be ready for it. Next in the list, it is my great pleasure to introduce you to Tottenham Cowspurs. Spurs, right? Cowboys, Spurs, you get it. Anyway, anywho, interesting one because Tottenham right now have Timo Werner, And the Arsenal fan base needs to just stop the head loss. We do not need Timo Werner. That was not the move we should have done. Just look at what Timo Werner's been up to. Now, it might work for Spurs. It might not. The idea that Timo Werner is the player for us, I think, is silly. Like, first of all, he exploits space. We have no space. He doesn't finish, by the way, which is literally the only problem we have right now. So what'll fix it? Bringing in a guy who's going to finish even worse? Probably not. They have Dragasine or Dragovic or
Dragosine. Yep.
Dragasine, thank you. But so when I watch Spurs, I just see the same thing over and over again. Some pretty patterns, some good attacking play, absolutely naive, reckless, disorganized defending. And the players that they think are good, like Cutie Romero, just continue to embarrass themselves defensively. This game could have gone either way. I don't think Spurs defend properly, but they were the only team playing because Manchester United are bad. I understand why they get the praise they get, because they try to play football the way we think football should be played, on the front foot with the ball, keeping it on the ground, passing it around, creating chances. But I think what I've come to appreciate, especially under Mikel, is how you handle losing the ball and how you defend when you don't have possession is part of the game, it turns out. I don't think they do it properly. So what do you think of them? And I think without Heung-min Son, what we saw against United is they just missed that X factor that can win them a game. Now, maybe we potentially missed that X factor too, by the way, and we don't have a Heung-min Son, but I think that's going to be a big miss for them for however long he's gone. What do you think of them in this game and overall?
Yeah, it's a very interesting game to watch. I think I said earlier, you can see that one team believes in what they're doing and one team doesn't know what they're doing, and that's clear to me. And so whether I'm going to try to be adult about this because it's Spurs, but please just take this as just me looking at football. They have a system. They have a system. They have a 2-3 system, and they have a 2-3-5 system, and they box midfield. They use their fullbacks in rather than have three like we do, 3-2 in the main. They push their fullbacks in, and they are very front-footed, and they play out from the back. They're brave. I've seen it. I felt it for myself in a home game at the Emirates. When they were at their best. They got their centre backs back now. Van der Ven's back with Romero. So rather than playing fullbacks in, I find it quite interesting that Spurs have a system that doesn't really seem to be personnel based. They've gone from a team that used to be around 2 or 3 players. When those players weren't there, they weren't so effective. They've gone to a more collective approach, which is far more around changing the identity and the culture of the team. They're like a slightly earlier version of Arsenal, trying to restore the connectivity to their fan base. What Ange has done very well, he's managed to manage up to Daniel Levy, which is hard. I can say that now based on what they've done in January. He's managed out to the media. He's managed out to his fans. He's managed out and downwards to his players. And they all believe in him. So whether you rate Spurs or not, they've achieved that. Manchester United would like that. Chelsea would like a bit more of that. They've achieved that. And that's something that we know is a powerful, powerful thing when you're connected. So have they got all the personnel at the moment? They haven't. Have they spent money? Yes, they have. They spent significant amount of money. Have been able to cover it with selling a big academy player. Yes, they have. They've been able to sell and recoup big money that they can use to reinvest into their team. So it's not done with bargain basement. So the goalkeeper, I think, he's decent. I don't think he's brilliant, but he's decent. They had a very good season. They managed to bring in Doggy, which I think he's a good player potentially, but he's young. He does some stupid things in his box, but he's got potential. Pedro Porro, I thought was done. I thought he was a wing back, and they've repurposed him into something that's passable. So they got some potentially good players there. Pepe Sarr played, I think, one of his debuts against us last season, got ran off the pitch and was substituted. He's been recovered and promoted ahead of a Højbjerg, and now he's signed a new contract, and he's young and has got potential. So they have some nice pieces that they can develop on. So Daniel Levy has worked out, you know what, I can't do what I did to Pochettino and not support him. I've got to support Ange. If I don't, I'm going to get lynched. And so he's learned from the past. So it's interesting to see what they do next and how they want to progress. I don't dismiss them yet. I don't think they've got enough solidity. They give up too many chances, Elliot. I'm sure you know the numbers, XG against. They give up too many chances to have any sustained title attack. But you can see they've started something. And I bet you a lot of Man United fans walking out of that ground yesterday wish they had some of the things that Spurs had so they could hold on to it. So you've got to give them credit where credit's due. But I don't want to give them too much credit. As Roy Keane said, just let's relax, shall we? It's just a period they're going through. And again, when teams start to focus on them and what they do, much like they've done with us, I think they'll flatten out over time.
I mean, they're 16th in expected goals allowed.
Yeah.
Only Fulham, Newcastle, Luton, and Sheffield United are worse. By the way, Newcastle, 7.5 of that came in the Liverpool game. So and to be fair to Spurs, I think a huge chunk of that, now that I think about it, came in the
Chelsea game.
Well, to be fair, it's only 4.
Yeah.
So even if you want to give them a little credit, they've been giving them up in big chunks. So yeah, defensively, it's been an issue for them all season. This is really nothing new. We'll just have to see what happens. Now they are over in attack. They've got 36 expected goals. They've turned that into 44 goals. What we would give for that kind of finishing. We have the exact same XG as Spurs, and we have turned that into 7 fewer goals. One of the benefits of having
therein lies our problem. Therein lies our problem.
Yeah, completely.
Right? That's it. There's nothing else to see. But podcasting on Arsenal right at the moment is tough because we have one problem. We have other things we want if you want to talk about them. But if you look at it from a general point of view, we have one problem, and it's the very last thing you do.
For what it's worth, it's at both ends too, because we currently have the best defense statistically on underlying, 16 expected goals allowed. The nearest is City. Okay, but we are by far the best in expected goals allowed, and we've conceded 4 more goals than expected, whereas Liverpool have conceded, 4 fewer than expected. And that, again, all this stuff sort of explains where we are at the moment. It's certainly not a rewarding way to analyze football just by reading off a spreadsheet. But I think what those numbers tell you is what your eyes tell you, which is it feels like shots are flying in against us at a rate that's a bit unlucky. And it certainly feels like we can't finish in front of goal. And the spreadsheet's telling you what your eyes are telling you. You don't need the spreadsheet. If I said to you, do you think Arsenal have been a bit unlucky with goals flying in and a bit unlucky with their finishing? You'd say yes, and the numbers would tell you that you're right. So let's move on as we start to get to the end of the power rankings here. I have Villa next. You could have put Villa below Spurs for me. I think Villa are one of those teams that, similar to Tottenham, have been a bit fortunate and have a bit of a glass jaw. But it's funny, right? They don't have a great expected goals allowed. Their expected goals allowed, though, is still 5th, which is respectable, whereas Spurs is 16th. When I watch Villa, I see a really good team. I really do. And they have the talent. I think they have a lot of players that are really good. They've managed to quietly assemble a team that, when you look at it, is really good. I'm trying to think of players that we'd take at Arsenal. I think Douglas Luiz is one we're certainly interested in. Yuri Tielemans is someone, by the way, we were linked with. He doesn't play a ton. Ollie Watkins is good. Just plain good, I think. They have some decent defenders. I think Emi Martinez is proving himself to be a good goalkeeper. It's a good team. But when I watch them, I still can't help, Clive, but think that high line is a risky approach that some days it's going to work and some days they're going to get burned. What do you think about Villa? I think it's time for me to start giving them more of the credit than I have, but I just feel like it's a bit of a high wire act too.
Yeah, it's quite similar to Spurs, really. There's a little bit of feel good about Villa, particularly about how they play and how brave they are. But when I watch them, I do think we can. I think they look vulnerable. I just think he can take them. I think he can take them. I thought Calvert-Lewin should have scored in the first half yesterday, just for half time. He didn't lift that shot. If he lifts that shot, they're going 1-0. That potentially Everton win that game. And so I just think there's a vulnerability about them. But again, respect the squad building. It's been done quite well. They've bought quite well. There are a couple of free transfers there, Kamara and Tielemans. They've bought quite well. They rotate them around in midfield. Douglas Luiz, 50-50 on him, Elliot. Is he an Arsenal level player or is he somebody that's been overhyped? I'm not sure. I watch him chug around sometimes in midfield and wonder if we'd accept that. I'm not sure we would. But But he's got ability on the ball, that's for sure. And he's very, very rounded as a midfielder, particularly facing the opposition goal. And so, yeah, John McKinn, British media darling, quite hard-working, very robust in challenges and bangs off his shots. Scored a winning goal against us, so we know what he's like. And he's played other good games against us historically. They lost Tyrone Mings on the first day. They lost Diego Carlos on the first day of the previous season, but now they haven't got him in the same time. So they brought in Clement Longley and Pau Torres to sort of supplement their defence. Yeah, they've got a decent squad that's been well put together. And Unai's got them in their system, and he's making sure that he has them in the video room for 15 hours a day. We know the story there, right? So we also know, I think for me, they lack a little bit of personality. When I say personality, I say big game personality in the second half of the season is to be tested. Let's be clear. Is to be tested. And I watched them yesterday. I thought, you didn't really rise to that. And when you're sitting there in the top four of the league, people will prepare for you differently. I think that's what they're going to have to rise to in the next phase of the season. As we know, things change when you turn the corner, right? So what's your space on that?
They could lose at Chelsea in the next round of the FA Cup coming up. That's their next game. And then they have the one big advantage that a club like Villa needs to sneak into the top four. One game a week for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
Or every other week. And that's it. That's what they've got. Navigate that and you're fine. Now, second to last game of the season.
Didn't they?
Yeah. I mean, you look at these teams like Spurs, what they're trying to do, like Villa, what they're trying to do. It's leverage that extra day off in the middle of the week. Leverage the fewer minutes so you can have a smaller rotation of players. Look at Newcastle. Newcastle last season did it brilliantly, got in the top four. This season, they've tried to use a small rotation of players. Granted, what's happened? They've all got injured. They've all got exhausted. It's totally collapsed. They couldn't manage Champions League and League. And if you look at the four clubs that have been in the Champions League, City had some injuries early in this season. Arsenal have had some injuries early in this season, but navigated it okay. Newcastle has collapsed, and United have been terrible. And that's what the four Champions League teams have done. And I'm sorry, but this has been a ridiculous 24 months or 12 months, whatever you want to call football, with the league, the World Cup, the league ending late, the season starting early, and then Champions League coming back to it's been really tough. And I think you're seeing some teams managing it better than others. Villa can try to leverage not having football. Now, actually, I need to correct the record here.
Yeah, they
probably will have conference league. Yeah.
And knowing Unai,
so they're going to. I do apologize, but
he will go.
I don't know how much they'll play anybody in that.
Until they won't have to, but they will go for it later on in the
semi-final, final.
They are got to be one of the top two favorites at that competition, right? So
it could be interesting, right? Because you could have Liverpool going to Villa with both of them facing a final in a secondary or tertiary European European competition ahead of them, because that's May 11th that Liverpool go to Villa. We'll see. Anyway, last two really quickly. I have Liverpool as second. Now remember, we're not ranking Arsenal. I have Liverpool as second behind City, and I can explain that in a moment. Do you think that's fair? What do you make of where Liverpool are at right now? Obviously doing brilliantly. Dismiss them at your peril. They're a fantastic team with a fantastic coach playing fantastically well. I don't know. I can pick the bones out of it if you want me to. What do you think of Liverpool right now?
Yeah, it's a strange thing, right? Because obviously we lost them in the cup game, and watching that game back, we did a rewatch, didn't we? It was quite difficult to watch it because we did so many good things and ended up on the wrong side of it because we didn't quite have the ability to finish and the mentality when it really mattered in both boxes. We were found wanting, and they won the game. We got to take that one on the chin. It's tough. I watched the Fulham game when they played Fulham, and I think it was an interesting one because they've got a young kid playing at right back because Trent is out injured, and he did okay, and they were struggling for a bit, and then I think Curtis Jones just took a shot and he got a big deflection, and they get their goal, and they go and win the game. And I was thinking, no matter how shots we had against West Ham and Liverpool, we haven't got any deflections like that gets you up and running, And I think a lot of the teams are going to find it a challenge playing against these low blocks. Even Liverpool going to find it a challenge. But you got to keep shooting, and they shoot, Elliot. They shoot from everywhere and anywhere. They don't even care if their feet are set. They're shooting. And so, yeah, it's interesting to see how Klopp has redeveloped this team. And what I do like about what he does is he has a play style which suits the players. He really does lean into those players. So Darwin Núñez is a great example of that. He's a running, dashing forward. So what do? They put him in running position so he can dash forward. He doesn't score that much, but he assists a ton, right? So do the expectations of him to score? Well, 90 million quid, if he was playing for Arsenal, we'd expect it. But they've managed to create an environment for him where it doesn't matter, as long as he causes trauma and trouble for the opposition. And they love him there. He's become a cult figure. So it's so interesting, the environment you create for your players to succeed. And Klopp is very good at setting that up. You know, he had Firmino playing for him for years. When they won the league, Firmino never scored at home. Could you imagine an Arsenal number 9 not scoring at home for a league season and us being cool about it? No chance. No chance, you know? So he does very, very well at creating an environment for players, protecting them, protective state. He does it really, really well, you know? And that's something we have to do as well. We have to create that for our own players.
Liverpool have what Spurs have, but better, which is the cheat code. A player who wins you stuff when it's not your best day.
Yeah.
A player that changes the plan that other teams come to the stadium with. And that's Mohamed Salah. And it feels like their whole season to me is how they get through this period without him and how he comes back. As long as Egypt makes the semifinal, he will not be available for our game at the Emirates with them. Egypt drew Mozambique, I believe, in their opening game. So that's not going to be good enough. They need to turn it up a little bit. But if they make it to the semifinal, Mohamed Salah will not be at that game with us. If they make it to the final, which they're certainly a favorite to do, he'd miss one more game, but the game he'd miss is Burnley at home, and I think Liverpool will get through that. What they have right now is Bournemouth away, and Bournemouth are excellent. Chelsea at home, Arsenal away. And they've got an EFL Cup semifinal in the middle there. Those 3 games, Bournemouth away, Chelsea at home, Arsenal away, none of those are bankers. We hope the one against us is a loss. And they'll probably have to navigate all 3 of them without Salah. So that's, our hope is that they drop points there. Maybe in all 3. It's not out of the question. Those are 3 hard fixtures without your best player. But I think also there's that question of how he comes back. I can remember years ago, Arsenal players coming back from the African Cup of Nations, and their season was wrecked. Now you never root for injury. I'm not saying injury, but just the extra minutes in the legs, playing more football at a period where you should be playing maybe a little less football. We'll see, Clive. But to me, that's their season hinges on how they get through the next few games without Salah and how he comes back to them.
Yeah, and Trent, because for me, Trent is as important. Trent, Van Dijk, and Salah.
I'd say he's a notch below, but no question, he's extremely important. One of the best players.
Yeah,
in the
well,
full stop.
it's me. I look at football from the back end of the pitch.
But someone's got to stick it in the net, right? Maybe that's me looking through my Arsenal lens right now, which is doesn't matter who creates what. Someone's got to stick it in the net.
Yeah, exactly. And but Salah's not getting the ball without Trent, mate. That's for sure. And there's no one else who can progress it. No one else who can press it like him. So it can be interesting to see what they do. I think Curtis Jones will have to step up, and he has done. I think he's a fine player. I think he's have to step up on the ball progression perspective. But Trent is so dominant as a passer. Losing him is going to be such an interesting thing. So you lose your exclamation point, and you lose your quarterback. Let's just see how they go. So it's going to be interesting.
Yep. I mean, it's a tough one, but we'll be talking about this in the future, but we have to beat them when they come to the Emirates. There's no other option whatsoever. And the way we played them in the last 2 games, I think we owe them beating them, because I think the results we've gotten in those 2 games are somewhat less than the performances we put together, and they're not going to have Salah, and we need to take advantage of that. So that leaves us with the top team. And I mean, if you wanted to have Liverpool top, you certainly be my guest. I have Manchester City top, and it's really this simple. Manchester City have held serve, so to speak, without Haaland and without Kevin De Bruyne. And in case you didn't notice at the weekend, Kevin De Bruyne is back. I've said this before, and people literally hate it when I say this. They laugh at me. They say I'm an idiot. But here's who I am. I'm the kind of person that says that thing again, despite touching the hot stove and feeling it burn. I'm going to say the thing again that has people calling me an idiot and laughing at me. So here I go. I think Kevin De Bruyne is underrated. I think he's more important than Haaland to Manchester City. I do. I think he is a match winner who cannot be taken out of a game. And I just, it drives me nuts that they still have this guy and he can still play at that level. And what else could have happened but him coming back from injury, coming on with 25 minutes to go and completely turning the game with the goal and assist and getting them the win there. Clive, I think with that man back and Haaland still to come, it feels a bit ominous to me. We're all just waiting for that 13 match run of winning every single game from Manchester City. And it feels a bit scary to me at the moment with those guys coming back.
Yeah, it does. It's different. We can almost convince ourselves it's not going to happen for us because when he's running around with his hair looking like the Zohan, looking really slick and new, I think it's a problem, right? And he's not even fit. He's just having a little jog and he's just passing around, overlapping, underlapping, and he just gets the ball. And you think, well, why couldn't anyone else do that? But yet he does it. And he does it so regular. I go back to a Charity Shield game, very similar. We were playing really well against them. He came on in the second half, not fit, just ran about for a bit and just turned the game. Just literally turned the game. He sees the game in a different way. He's able to work out your weak points and just run into those areas. And his execution and quality of delivery and his last action is just really, really good. And when a player makes a game looks that simple, you know he's a special player, right? And so yeah, he is he's their quarterback, he's their last pass person, and he's their last action person, all in one. You know, and not just us, but everyone else got to deal with him. And as soon as he gets fitter, we're all in a bit of trouble, aren't we? He says at the moment he can do 20, 25 minutes at full pace. Well, that was enough for Newcastle, who were spirited. That was enough to put them away. And so yeah, he's a bit ominous.
I don't love it. Thanks, I hate it. They obviously will have a lot of games coming up. They'll have the Champions League back. They're going to go deep in that competition again. They've drawn Copenhagen, so should be breezing through that. They've got Spurs away in the FA Cup. I expect them to probably win that and go through all those.
Spurs are their bogey team, though. Spurs are their bogey team.
I was just about to say that. Yeah.
So.
In the league, I wouldn't say they have it easy. I mean, they still go to Spurs in the league. They still go to Liverpool in the league. They still go to Brighton in the league. They still go to Bournemouth in the league. These are good teams. Arsenal obviously come to the Etihad where we last won in 1777. But that's going to be a game where we're going to need to get something, and we're certainly good enough to. So we'll have to see. They have a worryingly easy run-in once they've faced Spurs away. Their last 4 games are Forest, Wolves, Fulham, and West Ham, and none of the hard ones are away. I can't see a scenario where City aren't in it until the final day, but I don't think I see them running away with it from here. Is that right in your mind?
I think sometimes we look at next door neighbour's garden and think it's better than ours all the time, and it probably is. But with City our City are well. However,
good. Glad we cleared that up.
Well, I'm just looking at their bench yesterday, and obviously De Bruyne came on, Oscar Bob came on and did the business. Their youth player, the 20-year-old Norwegian international, they bought in for 15 million quid because they are uniquely funded to allow them to uniquely fund their academy and make sure that the best talents arrive at their club. So, and he was able to come on that pitch and people were criticising him for selling Cole Palmer. Well, they're probably giggling knowing they had him in the background. So Cole Palmer can give 42 million quid to their FFP and sort of FFP numbers, because again, he's the academy player, so that's pure profit. They can reinvest that elsewhere. So so yeah, it's a challenge when you hold yourself up against that team that owns every single trophy in the game at the moment in Europe. It's a challenge. I'm not about to use City to beat Arsenal with. I want to beat them. I'm not going to hold them up and say we need to do what they do because we are at a disadvantage resource-wise. We just are. They can put people to one of their 12 clubs they own globally. They have a model which we don't have. And sometimes we have to be mature about this. Doesn't mean we have to submit and we don't want to win. And our manager looks like somebody that wants to win, and he behaves like that. And we need that level of absolute intensity and desire to win, to beat this team. It's not going to be done by smiling and happy handshakes. We have to be pushing our standards up, because that's what we're dealing with, And so it's a challenge. But they have players on that bench who are not doing well. Nunes is not doing well yet. Rico is a young lad. There are still players there for, obviously, Jack Grealish, £100 million not playing. You were asking about Havertz earlier on. Jack Grealish is not playing. He didn't play for a period last season, but was there when the crunch mattered, when the medals were being handed out. So it's about having that depth of squad to enable your players to be fresh when it really, really counts. And they've obviously got Calvin Phillips sitting there unused. No matter what he does, he's unused. Another 50 million quid player. Unique, right? Unique team in our time. Uniquely funded. I keep saying that. I don't think people realise that, particularly around youth academy side of things, that funding does not sit with the first team funding. It sits elsewhere, like it does for supporting the women's team. And so it is something we have to bear in mind, and it takes time. For those people who are wondering how Newcastle are doing it, Newcastle are making a big splash at youth level. They are attracting some of the best talents around the country. They are 10, 15 years behind City. They are 10, 15 years behind Chelsea. But they can invest at that level. They can bring in talent, and they will build that layer to eventually feed into the first team. So it's not always what you see in the transfer rumours that really dictates where a club is going.
The story of their season is going to be told in March. It's pretty straightforward between now and then. I expect them to win basically every single game they play between now and then. And then in March, in addition to whatever cups they're in, and the Copenhagen second leg and all that, they have United, Liverpool, Brighton, Arsenal, Villa. United at home, Liverpool away, Brighton away, Arsenal home, Villa home. They can win them all. I mean, they're good enough. We know they can. But United, Liverpool, Brighton, Arsenal, Villa. It's a tough run, and they'll have a lot of games in and around it. Depends how fit they are when they go into that run. Whether they do run away with this league or fall slightly behind or wherever they wind up being, I think March is going to determine it. And I think that's going to be a very, very interesting one for them. And obviously we have to go do our business for any of that to matter. Hopefully when we do go to the Etihad, we will be into the pot for a draw for the next round of the Champions League. By then we'll have some other things on our mind as well. So we'll keep track of all of that. Let's leave it there. A good long 90 minutes to get you through. We've got a lot of fun stuff over on the Patreon side this week planned, so I hope you will join us over there if you would. Trying to do some fun stuff. We do scouting videos. We do rewatch videos. One Club, which is a women's team pod. We have the instant reactions, obviously. We do power rankings like we did today, but we do those regularly over there. 3 big questions where you guys submit questions. We pick out sort of the 3 biggest questions that are being asked around sort of Arsenal, zeitgeist, diaspora, whatever you want to call it. And a couple other concepts that are escaping me at the moment. Plus, we have the Discord where we chat with you every day, and there's tons of head loss and people being ridiculous, but also sharing lots of fun information and thoughts. We do office hours, which we've stopped, and I need to get that back, where we actually have like an audio room where we all hang out and talk to you, and you can talk back, and it's like live chatting. Lots of good stuff over there is the point. And if you want to give it a try, we would just love to have you there. And if you hate it, and you say, I hated it, and I want a refund, then we'll do that too. Because if you hate it, well, look, you know by now whether you hate us or not. Like, let's be honest. And it's not just me. You might like the other guys. You don't like me. That's fine. You can just mute the part with me. Anyway, enough of that nonsense. Clive's on Twitter. Clive PFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
My name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. Big 10-0 coming up. We need it. We love you. We'll talk to you after Arsenal 10. Palace no.